Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Be That Lawyer with Fretzin podcast. Thrilled that you're here today. If you have not heard of Fretzin Inc. and the Be That Lawyer brand, we've got books, we've got articles, we've got videos, we've got blah, 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 blah. We got a bunch of stuff. Check it out online, type my name into Google, whatever you want to do. But most importantly, continue listening to this podcast because I really do believe that no one else has better guests than I do. And today, guess what, is no different. I've got Heather waiting in the wings. How you doing, Heather?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing well. It's our first like blizzard here in Chicago, and we're
Ooh.
talking. This is just before Thanksgiving when this is being recorded, and I'm looking outside. It's just white. It's just a sheet of white outside,
Wow,
and
really?
I had to
Okay, that
wake up.
probably means it's snowing where my freshman college son is too. So
Yes, you
I
probably,
have to reach out
probably.
to him.
And I had to get my teenager up a few minutes early to say, "Hey, you might have to get up early and scrape your car." And he was like, just moping down the hallway anyway. Um, you have a great quote of the show, Winston Churchill, and I'm going to do my best not to screw this up, but I'm no promises. Here we go. Never give in, never give in, never, 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 in nothing, great or small, large or petty, never give in except to convictions of honor and good sense. All right, I did it.
Yes,
I think I nailed that. All right.
you did.
Welcome to the show, Heather, and please share why is that your quote of the show? Why do you love that quote by Winston Churchill?
So I will note that many people may have heard it, but they probably heard it incorrectly with that last part left off. That's
Hmm,
how I see it all the time. And that last part is really
I
important.
think so.
And it's incredibly important, right? So to
Yeah,
me, it speaks to tenacity, discipline, and intentionality. And knowing that going all in is worthwhile. And you've got to be tenacious and disciplined and really intentional about it. But sometimes circumstances change
yeah,
or new information comes to light that does and should change whether you continue on the same path
yeah.
and instead gives you new information in which to utilize to be intentional around should I stop? Should I pivot? Should I make a course correction? What should I do?
Yeah. And I'm going to turn it around and say the opposite. Give in, give in, give in, always, 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 when it's absolute BS and it's not worth your time to fight. Just let it go, move on. It's not worth your energy. You know, these little fights and these little tiffs and politicking at the office or whatever it might be that people
Right?
engage in, right? It's the opposite. Just give in and walk away and don't engage, right? It's like drains
Oh,
your
it's not worth
energy.
it.
It's not worth
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now Winston Churchill can quote me. How about that? All right. Making my mark. Give in, give in, give in, always, always, always. All right. So now we're on to it. Okay. Heather, I'm so happy that you're here. You're another top lawyer coach that I am building a friendship with, and I'm just so excited about how we do things similarly, but there's everyone's got their superpower. Everybody's got their
Yep.
jam of like what they're bringing to the table, and I'm not really like an expert or any. I wouldn't even call myself like moderate, like in like storytelling and like how to like help lawyers and professionals like tell their story and build their brand and that type of thing. Give us a little background leading into how you became a top lawyer coach in working with lawyers all over the country.
So I am one of those lawyers who actually worked for a long period of time in the law. I started out very naive, as most lawyers do, somewhat burned out several years in, and quickly realized, okay, I got to do something different if I'm going to make it work. And ultimately, for me, that meant changing firms. I was not at a good fit firm for me. It was a great firm in many ways. I'm glad I started there. I learned a lot, but it wasn't a good fit for me to become partner, build a practice because it wasn't the right the kind of law they did wasn't really what I liked. And so I moved over, made partner, built a big book of business, was very quote unquote successful. And frankly, I was very happy. But then along the lines, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I was actually very young when I had breast cancer. I was 38 years old when I was diagnosed. It was very aggressive. And initially, the prognosis was not good. And I did not know it at the time, but that planted a seed that later pulled me out of the law. So, fought my cancer, took like 10, 11 months completely off, came back, continued to grow my business, was very successful. I was a partner. It was a big law firm, actually. I was in big law. And I remember this very distinct moment a couple of years after I had come back, built my business, and something just kind of felt off to me. And I was in the kitchen and I was doing my dishes, and you hear about these moments when people are, on the operating table and maybe they die for a few seconds and they look from above. Well, I had actually one of those moments where I felt like I was watching myself from above. And this person looked like me. They talked like me. They sounded like me, but it didn't feel like me anymore,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm not a woo person really, but that kind of shook me. And that was the beginning for me of going, okay, whoa, what's going on? Obviously, this experience has changed me in some way. I need to figure this out. And I did not know it was going to lead me out of the law. But ultimately, it did over time. And I went through a couple of year, like several year journey of what do I want to do? Do I just step back? Do I want to step back and stay here? A friend of mine who is a coach, she's an executive coach, said, you'd be a really good coach. And that kind of planted that seed that
Hmm.
eventually I started to look into and realized, oh, I could use my skills as a coach. And so that got me on the path. And then a couple years later, I decided I'm ready. I want to leave. And, service has always been a big value for me. And I was able to express my value through my work with my clients, and I really enjoyed my work. But that cancer journey changed me in a lot of ways. And it really made me want to serve people on a more individual basis. And it's funny because when I left, I did not work with lawyers initially. I was a work-life balance coach for men and women, but mostly women professionals. And slowly but surely, lawyers started coming to me. Slowly but surely, more and more of my clients were lawyers. Then they were like, well, you built a great book of business as a big law attorney. How did you do it? So I started more business coaching, and it slowly morphed
Hmm.
into the
As it
business that it
happens,
is
as it
now.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I was someone who 100% didn't want to work and never thought twice about lawyers. Like when I got into it, it was all entrepreneurs,
right.
sales coaching. I used the word sales. My company name was called Sales Results Inc., which,
Mm,
for most entrepreneurs, love that name. Lawyers, less so,
hmm
right?
hmm
So, and I think it's important to just put out there that it's okay to have a second chapter or a third chapter in your career. It doesn't have to
Oh my
be
gosh.
start and finish and retire at this big firm and blah, blah, blah. I mean, for some people, that's exactly what they want. And for others, like there's adventures out there to be had. And you only get, and you had a near death experience. I've had that. And like you get one shot at this damn thing.
Yeah.
And if you're not happy and you're not doing what you really were meant to do and you start to like figure it out or think about it, it's take it seriously. It's pretty important.
I would say that experience and thinking I was likely to die at the age of 38 or 39 with a 6 and 2-year-old at home really changed my perception of risk and what is and is not risky.
Hmm.
And I had not really thought, I always thought, and this is the typical lawyer thinking, making a big change is risky. On the other side of that, though, if you have this inkling that this isn't right, something has changed, and you don't go down that, I think that's riskier because it changes you from the inside in
Yeah.
ways you're not going to like. And it makes you a more bitter, resentful person. So listen to those
Yeah.
and understand that there's risk on both sides.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of, I mean, this is how I'm going to transition. Let's see if it works. But like, we're telling our stories on this
Mhm.
podcast, and I think there's a lot of lawyers who struggle telling their story and leveraging that in a positive way in legal marketing and networking and building a brand and building a business.
Yep.
I was speaking to a lawyer yesterday who was in jail for drunk driving and injured somebody terribly and just his story of how what happened and how he redeemed himself and now he's back in the law again and like I mean the story's incredible and powerful and I
Yes.
just didn't want to get off the phone with the guy. So let's talk a little bit about the benefits of using storytelling for lawyers that really have a story or can that aren't maybe getting it out.
So there's two types of storytelling. There's the branding storytelling, which you're talking about, which is the individual lawyer's story,
Hmm.
which I find a lot of lawyers really hesitant to share.
Yeah.
Like they don't want to make it about them. And so my advice for those who feel that way is start by telling stories in different ways that showcase who you are, your approach. And then as you get comfortable with sharing client stories, you can then start sharing more of your story. What I have found is that once they break the ice on one, they're willing to go into the other. And I would say when it comes to sharing your story, we all think our stories are not that compelling. I don't have that important of a story, but you do. Everybody does. Everybody has a reason why they do what they do. Everybody has some, reason why they continue. They have, the background of this is what's important and this is why. Your story showcases your style, your approach, how you relate to your clients, and it also showcases your values. And that's what's so beneficial about it, because the thing that I think more lawyers need to understand is you're not there to represent everyone, right? You do not want every potential client you could possibly have in your field because they're not all a great fit. We all know we've had those clients that are super needy, super difficult, the ones that we see the phone ringing and we're like, oh, I have to answer this, right? The brilliance of storytelling, both telling stories about clients, which then still showcases your approach, your style, etc., and also telling your own story, is it attracts better clients to you. And when I mean better, it's not that the other people are bad, it's just they're not a good fit for you from a values perspective, from a personality perspective.
Yeah, and I love that. And people don't take into account the importance of doing business with people like you and how
Mhm.
wonderful that can be. So just, I work with the most amazing, wonderful people, lawyers, and I don't have a jerk in the bunch. I don't have an ego in the bunch. I don't have any because that's not who I'm attracting. By the way, those people know everything anyway. They don't need me. Side note, but you gotta like, it just I think that's really where people want to be, and they don't always necessarily know how to get those kinds of clients that appreciate them and have that they can build that relationship with, and that then you get more longevity with those clients too.
Yeah, storytelling is the end for that. It is what showcases who you are as a person. It showcases your personality, your approach, how you relate to clients. And it also helps you, especially when you start to use not just your story, but other stories to showcase. So we all hear about, show, don't tell.
Mm.
And you're going to be a guest on my podcast soon. And you made this point yourself. You say you don't do storytelling, but I think you actually know storytelling more than you think. You just don't identify it as such.
Well, that's probably
And
that's probably true, but I'm not like teaching people storytelling maybe to the
right.
degree I should, but I am definitely telling stories. Yes.
Yes, yes. And but it showcases what you do, how you do it, who you do it for, and you know, kind of the why behind why you, what makes you special without you having to say it.
Mm.
Because that's uncomfortable. We all think of
Yeah.
sales as having to tell people, oh, I had these degrees and I've done these. And I like to actually, I have a great example. When I was a very young lawyer, there were two partners I worked for a lot, and they taught me a lot about storytelling. And I didn't know it at the time, that's what it was, but it really is what it was. So one partner was a female partner with an okay book of business. She was doing okay, but she worked hard for that business, like crazy hard. And she would take me on client lunches and pitches, and it was always a ask a couple questions and then, oh, I've done that. I did 5 of those in the last year and we got great results for clients, and like very general kind of talk, right? And it was the most uncomfortable thing. Everybody would get kind of uncomfortable and quiet, and it did not land well at all.
Mm.
The other client, when he would take me on lunches, would ask deeper questions and would help solve problems. And if something came up that he had, oh, you know what? This came up with the client a couple months ago. Let me ask you a few more questions. Okay, well, here's what we learned. Here's what we did here. Here's why. Have you thought of? That's a way to utilize storytelling. And you don't even, people don't realize you're storytelling, but you are.
Yeah.
And it showcases so clearly his approach, his style, how he works with people without him having to say it, to
Yeah.
tell them.
It's a
That's what's
great
so
it's a great
valuable.
workaround. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. But lawyers struggle with that. How do they identify good stories from either past experiences or without, like compromising client confidentiality. Because, like, let's say
Right.
they won the day for a client, there's a story there, but
Yeah.
they've got to be careful too.
So a couple of things. The starting point is to just start by brainstorming and really look back to your past year or two. Start there because if you go too far, you get like overwhelmed. And look for like what are common themes that show up over and over and over again. What do you wish your clients would know before they hired you or did or didn't do that you're always having to get them out of trouble with, right? What are common like pitfalls that you see over and over again? Like start there and note that it's not just about wins. You want the whole point of sharing stories is to provide some type of value and insight to the people you're sharing a story with. So what's the win or the lesson? It doesn't necessarily mean a win for you or your client. It's the lesson learned,
Mm,
the thing that you now know, right? So that's number one. Something that can help, and I promise I will get to the client confidentiality provision, but when you're identifying stories, you don't worry about that yet. You want to get super specific because otherwise you're going to have trouble utilizing them later on. So get as specific as you can and also think about like what I find with my clients, it helps a lot to organize their thoughts into categories or what people in marketing call content pillars. So, for example, I was a lending lawyer. I would maybe think of it, okay, what happens at the contracting deal stage? What happens during the life of the loan when you're like the back and forth day-to-day issues? And then what about when you have distressed borrowers? Those were kind of like the big issues that we would deal with. So if I thought of it in those ways, it's easier for me to identify stories underneath each one.
mm,
Oh, well, this issue comes up and here's and so get very specific and log them somewhere, right? So, and just note that these stories can be utilized in writing. If you're writing on LinkedIn, they can be in articles. They make it more compelling when you utilize stories to make a point. And when you start to do this, you remember them more freely because then you can use them in networking too, like that partner I mentioned earlier.
hmm
The other thing that I would note is understand who you're speaking to. You need to have a very clear idea of who your perfect client is in order to come up with the right, not just the right stories, but then know how to tell the story correctly. Who is it that you're speaking to? And have one person in mind. That's going to help you a whole lot when it comes to identifying what stories.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would say, like, let's say you're putting together a presentation and there's a point you're trying to make, and you're like, a story would work really well here. So step back and go, okay, well, what's the problem? What's the struggle? What's the issue? What's the lesson learned? Where have I seen that? What client dealt with that? And get super specific to identify the story you want to utilize.
Yeah.
When it comes to sharing them, first off, the vast majority of stories, you don't need to give all the background information. There's slices. Like usually you can tell a story in a couple of sentences or less, right? It's like you don't have to give every bit of background information. The other thing is you don't have to share it immediately. So I had a client who had a big trial this year. She has a lot of stories she can tell from it. She knows that she can share little slices and she could be doing it now. And it's she's not gonna like divulge any confidential information. However, she realizes that if she shared it immediately, her client might go, "Well, is that me?" and not love it. So she's logging them for later, right? So we can log them for that's why I say when you first brainstorm, go back because you can utilize stuff from your past into the present. The other thing I would say is if you're getting information that you're like, well, this might be too much, hope like get really specific and then identify, well, what is the actual lesson and how could I create a fact pattern around it? And what works really well there is like A versus B. So here's what I see a lot. Here's also what I see a lot. Here's how you deal with it. Or here's the approach that I recommend.
hmm
You can pull back a little bit, but you're still storytelling because you're creating specificity around it.
Yeah.
Is that making sense?
It does. It does. And what I like, I mean, from a branding and marketing perspective, brilliant. From a business development in the meeting with a prospective client too. I think
Yeah.
there's too much pitching and selling and convincing, and this is why we're so great. And this is and not maybe enough storytelling and not enough obviously questioning. I mean, I'm a big question guy. Like it's all about asking questions and listening and
Yep.
empathy and all those things. However, there are stories that need to be told and examples that need to be provided in those meetings to make it like not just an interrogation feeling type of meeting. It should feel
Right.
like two friends having a conversation. If you don't incorporate examples and stories and pepper people with that, it's not going to feel as authentic.
That is absolutely true. And what I would say, and the way to make these stories really compelling and relatable, and frankly, the way they sell is to be super specific in who you're talking to and think about what do they need to know? Why do they need to know this? Only give the information that's a need to know for the lesson learned, the thing they need, right?
Hmm.
The other thing is understand that you are not the hero of the story. You, the lawyer, is not the hero of these types of stories. You're the hero of your branding story, right? You're not the hero of the stories you're telling when you're marketing, and trying to tell the client story and have them learn the lesson. The hero is the client. The hero is the person you're talking to. So they're the Luke Skywalker, if you're a Star Wars fan. You're
Sure.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're not the main character. You are a helper.
Yeah.
And you know, the way to do that is to just keep that in mind, and then to showcase you're not telling them again. You're showing, well, here's how I think about this and why. And so you need to be very unafraid when telling these stories of giving your opinion, of telling the style, of differentiating your approach versus some other attorneys. So, for example, I have a client who he's a qui tam lawyer. Do you know what that is?
No,
It's
what is that?
Whistleblower Act. And so he helps companies when people have whistleblower claims and the
Hmm.
government gets involved.
Okay.
And his approach is not there's two types of attorneys in that space who are the defense attorneys. There's the stall at every possible, moment, like push back, be, hard negotiator. And then there's his style, which is very different. And it's much more I want to be not friends, but I'm going to be kind. I'm going to be open, only open to the things I have to, right?
Hmm.
But I'm going to be helpful. And he's found that his clients get better results. They spend less money. And so when he is telling stories, he showcases that approach. And so that people know, well, this is my style. This is how I do things. Not every client wants that. And he's okay with that because he doesn't want the client that's like, no, 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 I want to fight back. I want to do all this other stuff that he thinks is the wrong way about
Yeah.
going about it.
Hmm. So what sort of, we're wrapping up, like final tips can you share about effective storytelling that actually helps you sell yourself again without selling?
So I think really the biggest tip is don't forget that you're not trying to attract everybody out there.
Okay.
You're not trying to represent everybody.
Right.
Keep in mind your perfect client and speak very specifically to them every time you're telling a story.
Okay.
What is in it for them? Not you, but them.
Yeah.
And you're going to be a lot better at telling a really compelling, good story that connects and showcases your style, showcases your approach, and showcases the way you think about things.
Yeah. Well, really terrific. And I want to wrap up with our game changing. Used to be a podcast, now it's a book, which is like, I think that's a Be That Lawyer First, by the way, where we're doing a game changing podcast or book. This was actually a podcast that turned into a book called Building a Story Brand. Can you talk just briefly about that and what that's all about?
So, building a story brand really goes deeper into storytelling and how to build your brand off of your own story and then storytelling within your marketing. So,
Hmm.
if you want to go a lot deeper and learn how to utilize stories and especially how to utilize your own story in a way that connects with people and still isn't all about you, makes it more about them, it's a fabulous book.
Yeah.
I highly recommend
I
it.
have to, yeah, that's one I haven't checked out. I have to put that on my Hanukkah list, if you will. Um, as we wrap up, want to thank our sponsors, of course, Rankings.io, just crushing it for law firms, especially in the PI space, and the podcast Law Her. advocating for women to be their best selves and live their best lawyer lives. Um, Heather, thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, they want to hear about more about the coaching you do, and you do a lot of things in the legal coaching space. What are the best ways for them to reach you?
So you can reach me via email, heather@heathermoulder.com. It's Moulder, not like the X-Files Mulder,
Okay.
if you're of that genre.
That generation or
Of
what?
that generation,
All
yes.
right.
I'm also on LinkedIn, and all my website is coursecorrectioncoaching.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again. I'm excited to be on your podcast. This is like what we call a pod swap, I guess. And
Yep.
it's just wonderful when two people can get together and collaborate like this and really put out great advice and information and education for an industry that, really needs it and desires it.
Yeah.
So I'm appreciative of you and thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. That's our jam. Have a little fun, talk a little biz dev and all that.
Yep.
Hey everybody, thank you for spending time with Heather and I today on Be That Lawyer with Fretzin. I'm just so thrilled that you're investing in yourself and your time to take in this kind of content. And by the way, Heather, do you want to just mention your podcast since you mentioned it
Oh,
about earlier?
it's the Life and Law podcast.
Yeah. And so check that out too, everybody. It'll all this information in the show notes, so you don't have to worry. But thank you for spending your time. And again, don't be shy about telling other lawyers about this great show called Be That Lawyer, so we can continue to build our audience and help as many lawyers as we can. All right, everybody, take care, be safe, be well. We'll talk again soon.